You know how this story ends. One brother kills the other. The first murder. The first grave dug into ground that had never held a body before. But you have probably never asked the real question. Not how Cain killed Abel. Why? And the answer the text gives you is far stranger and far closer to home than the version you were taught. This story lives in Genesis chapter 4. It is only 16 verses long, 16 verses to hold the entire weight of the first death in human history, and almost everything that matters happens in the spaces between the lines. So picture the scene. Two brothers, the very first two children ever born, according to the text. Cain is the older one. His name sounds like the Hebrew word forgotten or acquired, because his mother said she had gotten a man with the help of God. Abel is the younger, and his name is the part nobody tells you about. Abel in Hebrew is hevel. It means breath, vapor, a puff of air that vanishes the moment you exhale. The second child born into the world is named fleeting, named here and gone. The text is telling you how this ends before the boy can even speak. Cain works the ground. He is a farmer. Abel keeps flocks. He is a shepherd. And one day, both of them bring an offering to God. Cain brings some of the fruit of the soil. Abel brings the firstborn of his flock, and specifically the fat portions, the best cuts, the most valuable thing a shepherd owns. God accepts Abel's offering. God does not accept Cain's. And here is where most people stop and assume they understand. They think the lesson is simple. One brother gave a good gift. One brother gave a cheap one. God rewarded the generous one and rejected the stingy one, and the stingy one got jealous. But look closer. The text never says Cain's offering was bad. It never says God was angry at the gift. Read it again, and you will notice something uncomfortable. The story refuses to explain why. This is one of the oldest puzzles in all of Scripture. Ancient rabbis argued about it for centuries. Early Christian writers argued about it too. Why one and not the other? And the most honest answer the text offers is not about the offerings at all. It is about what happens next. Because God does not abandon Cain. This is the part that gets skipped. God turns to Cain, the rejected one, the angry one, and speaks to him directly. God asks him why his face has fallen. And then God says something that has echoed for 4,000 years. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Sin is crouching at your door. The Hebrew word there is the image of a predator, a wild animal lying in wait, low to the ground, muscles coiled, ready to spring. God is not condemning Cain. God is warning him. There is something hunting you, and it is right outside, and you can still master it. This is the moment the whole story turns on, not the offering, the choice that comes after the disappointment. Now step back into the real world for a moment, because this is where the history makes the story sharper. The setting of Genesis 4 is not abstract. It describes a world transitioning from herding to farming. The exact transition archaeologists trace in the ancient Near East roughly 10,000 years ago in the region of the Fertile Crescent. The conflict between the farmer and the shepherd was not just a family drama. It was the defining economic tension of the ancient world. Settled agriculture versus nomadic herding. Fences versus open land. The people who first heard this story knew that rivalry in their bones. And there is more. The text says Cain, after the murder, goes off and builds a city. The first city in the Bible is founded by the first murderer. Archaeology gives us a haunting parallel here. Some of the oldest known settlements on Earth, places like Jericho and Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey, date back 9,000 years and show us humanity's first experiments with walls. Walls to protect, walls to divide, walls built by people who had learned to fear each other. The story of Cain is, in a strange way, the story of how civilization itself was born out of violence and the need to keep it out. But hold that thought, because we have not reached the murder yet. Cain says something to Abel. The oldest Hebrew manuscripts actually leave a gap here, a missing sentence, as if the words themselves were too heavy to record. Then they are in a field, and Cain rises up against his brother and kills him. The first death is not an accident. It is not a disease, not an animal, not old age. The first human being to die is killed by the hand of his own brother. That is the claim the text is making. Death entered the human story through family. And then God asks Cain a question. Where is your brother Abel? Notice that God asks. The same way God walked through the garden one chapter earlier, asking, "Where are you?" God is not gathering information. God is giving Cain a door, a chance to tell the truth, a chance to say what he did. And Cain gives the answer that has become one of the most famous sentences ever spoken. I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Sit with how stunning that is. He has just killed his brother, and he stands before God and lies, and then he sneers. Am I my brother's keeper? Is it my job to look after him? And the terrible irony is that the word keeper is the word for a shepherd. Abel was the keeper of sheep, and Cain is asking whether he was supposed to be the keeper of the keeper. The answer the entire rest of the Bible gives is yes. Yes, you were. God tells Cain that his brother's blood is crying out from the ground Cain farmed. The soil that was his whole identity will now refuse to yield for him. He is cursed to be a restless wanderer. The settled man, the man of the land, is sentenced to never belong anywhere again. And Cain breaks. He says, "My punishment is more than I can bear." He is afraid that whoever finds him will kill him. Here is the last thing nobody expects. God protects him. God places a mark on Cain, not a mark of shame, but a mark of protection, so that no one who finds him will kill him. The first murderer is shown mercy by the one he wronged. The story that begins with rejection ends with a strange, stubborn grace. So what is this really about? Not jealousy over a gift. That is the surface. Underneath, Genesis 4 is asking a question that has not aged a single day. You will be disappointed by life. You will do something sincerely and watch someone beside you get the acceptance, the praise, the result that you wanted. Their offering rises, yours falls flat. And in that moment, something will crouch at your door. It will whisper that the problem is the other person. It will tell you that their light is the reason for your shadow. It will offer you the oldest lie in human history, that you would be whole again if they were diminished. That is the predator God warned Cain about, and it is still outside every one of our doors. The brilliance of this ancient text is that it locates evil not in a monster, but in a feeling everyone has had, the slow burn of comparison, the conviction that someone else's blessing is your loss. Cain was not a villain born wrong. He was a man who let resentment sit with him too long, who nursed it instead of mastering it, until it stood up and walked into a field with him. You are your brother's keeper. That is the line the whole story drives toward. Not because a rule says so, but because the alternative is a world of Cains, each one certain that his neighbor's existence is the thing standing in his way. The first question God ever asked a human about another human was simple: where is your brother? And 4,000 years later, it is still the only question that matters. So you thought you knew how this story ends. One brother kills the other. But the real story is not about how it ends. It is about the moment just before, when sin was crouching at the door and a man was told he could still rule over it. And so can you.